you believe in the existence of extraterrestrials? Tell me I'm crazy.
Mulder, you're crazy.
I can't give up. Not as long as the truth is out there. I want to believe.
Welcome to this episode of The X-Files, X-Files with your host Mark and Becky. Hi, Becky.
Hello.
Right, so we're really trundling through these. We're on, I think this is it the fifth show we've done of 4 episodes? So we're talking about episodes 17, 18, 19, 20. And we'll go through them as we go through them. First episode we're going to talk about tonight is EBE. Now, this was, I believe, aired a week after the last one, you know, because I've already noted there's sometimes these gaps going on the 18th of February 1994, written by Glenn Morgan and James Wong, directed by William Graham. This one is a mythology episode again, and it's kind of covering, it's a different perspective, but it's covering a similar ground to, say, Conduit and the Pilot and Fallen Angel. It starts with an Iraqi sort of fighter pilot shooting down a UFO, and we sort of kind of see it crash. Then it kind of jumps to a truck driver going through Tennessee, and who gets like some sort of electrical fault and has sort of truck, and he sees something above him, a UFO. In fact, it's a little weird to me. It looks like he's not quite looking out, but there's obviously a UFO above him. I wasn't quite sure what was going on with that. And then Mulder and Scully sort of jump in. I'm not gonna go through the plot now. We'll go through it as we go. What was your general feeling about this one?
I enjoyed this one. I let you say it's another mythology one, but I think it was more successful than some of the early ones in places. And you get obviously the introduction of the lone gunman. Yeah,
they make this episode. Well, no, there's some quite good points in this episode. I think this was really cleverly written episode, actually. Mm-hmm. It didn't quite hang together for me because it was like a cat and mouse chase across a place, and it kind of that what can feel a bit bitty, and because they were sort of juxtaposing and sort of Mulder and Scully stopping and talking and going to see people while a chase was going on, it didn't feel entirely coherent. But you know what, the material in it really worked well.
Well, see, I thought that did work well because of the kind of paranoia setting in this episode. You get lots of little things that are never quite explained, like Scully's bag is in a certain position when she leaves a room, and when she comes back in, it's moved, but nothing is ever kind of made of it. But even Scully, in addition to obviously Mulder's theories, even she's really seems to be, it's getting under her skin in this episode.
Yeah, it is kind of funny. At one point, she actually starts talking. Well, we'll get to it. I'll talk to that bit when we talk about the lone gunman. That there is something that kind of undermines her arguments, though she makes some really solid arguments. One of the things I really liked is Scully was making perfect sense in some of her counterpoints to sort of Mulder and the lone gunman's sort of beliefs. Which really puts you on her side, but then she got undercut, which makes you think, whoa, there's something really going on here. One of the things I did like is I feel that the series is getting real confidence in itself. There's a point where Mulder starts talking about UFO landings, crashes he's investigated, and he even mentions Lake Okoboji, which I think was conduit. So they're confident enough now that their own series is their reference points for some of the stuff that's going on. I kind of like that. I thought it's a sign that the whole series is, on feeling on firm legs and confident in itself. I really like that. And I think the writing was really terrific in this. As I say, it's there was also a few sort of contemporary cultural references. They weren't so much riffing on other. Yeah, I often say they're often riffing on other movies and other shows in some of the episodes. But the fact that they're almost riffing on themselves now, that's kind of what it feels like to me, which is kind of cool. But there is a reference to the Gulf War syndrome that pops up. And then that gives Mulder an opportunity to talk about soldiers seeing UFOs, which he always does, throws in stuff like that. But the Lone Gunmen, do you feel that they landed whole and complete characters in this one, or do you think they didn't quite feel they went on to feel?
I think it was a kind of welcome introduction, and they had the comedy and. I kind of, when I first watched the show, I really wanted to see more of them, but I had no idea that they would kind of develop into the characters that they would.
Yeah, I think the characters did land pretty much perfectly. Actually, they're a little less fun in this, though they're pretty fun. But they get a bit more broad, I think. But having said that, they're kind of well defined enough. I think because they look so different, they kind of, you don't get them confused with each other or anything like that, and that kind of helps. I do like the fact they're called the Lone Gunmen, or in fact they're not called. I might have this wrong, but I don't think they're actually called the Lone Gunmen in this. They just talk about their work on a magazine called the Lone Gunmen. Is that right? Yeah, that's right. But obviously they become known as the Lone Gunmen. They're like they reminded me a lot of Max Fenwick in Fallen Angel. It was that kind of sort of slightly more extreme version of Mulder. And I like the fact that one of them actually says, that's why we like you, Mulder. Your ideas are weirder than ours. So Mulder's even more extreme than these guys. I also like Frohickey. Frohickey is my favourite of the Lone Gunmen. I like them all, but Frohickey just makes me laugh. And he keeps going, Scully's there and again. Yep, she's hot, yep. On the phone. That was funny. Frohickey's a little more confident than the other guys. It is fun when we get Mulder interacting with his people who are like slightly more extreme versions of himself. I kind of enjoy that. You can just tell Mulder would love to spend all day with him just geeking out about stuff. You kind of get that feeling, don't you? There was also some other fun elements in this. There's a bit where, out of nowhere, Mulder and Scully encounter a group of sort of UFO watching partiers in the woods that kind of made me laugh. It said, oh yeah, where you watch just down there. I always feel that particular scene is kind of ripped off in Independence Day, because in Independence Day we have these like welcome to the aliens kind of individuals. So I felt Independence Day was riffing on that X-Files a bit there. Overall, I thought it was as I say, I felt it felt a little patchy to me, but it's just the level of writing was so good. Every scene kind of counted.
Yeah.
We even get, I think Mulder does a little flirting. I'm not quite sure if he is or if he's just making a joke, but there's one point Scully's going on about how she doesn't find anything the Lone Gunmen say is remotely plausible, and Mulder says, well, I think it's remotely plausible that someone thinks you're hot. That kind of made me laugh. And I do really love Scully's arguments. They're perfectly rational. The Lone Gunmen are talking about the government. It's all a government conspiracy, and you say, the government. They can't basically, string a sentence together, sort of thing, which is what you'd think, isn't it? Whenever you hear government's conspiracy, you think these guys aren't up to that kind of level of thinking. There's no way that's going to happen. And I did laugh at the fact she started going about how paranoid they were and how ridiculous it was, and at that second she finds a bug in her own pen.
Yeah.
And you can tell they're being followed with deep cover. I mean, the woman who puts her plants the pen has got kids with her, and it's like that takes a lot of planning and training and sort of some dark stuff going on for that sort of infiltration. So it is a, in a way, that this episode is like almost like a perfect representation of the main themes of the series, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dealing with like paranoia and distrust and what's going on, and I don't really understand what's going on. I kind of like, in many ways, you can watch this one and it encapsulates the series, with the comedy and the serious elements. It encapsulates the whole series. Did you also catch the joke about Barney?
No.
Oh, right. When the lone gunmen are talking, they're saying, it's something like, we've uncovered one of the most evil evil powers of the 20th century. And Mulder says, Barney?
As in the dinosaur?
Yeah. Which is probably a bit dated now. There's people that'll see that and not understand the reference, but it's a kids show. Big purple dinosaur. Byers one of the lone gunmen says it. He's talking to him and he sort of rolls his eyes and says, "The CIA." And it's kind of fun. I also like the fact Scully sort of affirms that Mulder's the only one she really trusts.
Yeah, and there's a lot of that kind of repetition in this episode, that they're the only two people they can trust.
Yeah, it felt a reaffirmation of what was kind of said in Art and the actions in Ice, and I thought that was really cool.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? This episode contains one of my favourite lines in the entire series, all 9 seasons. And it's a very simple line. It's when Scully just says, "The truth's out there, but so are lies."
Yeah.
I think that's a really powerful... Chris Carter didn't write this, but he comes up with some great lines. Some of his stuff. That did feel like they were riffing on a Chris Carter line. To great effect. I really liked it. Also, Scully does take some time about how she respects Mulder's sort of openness to these beliefs, but she also explains it kind of leaves him to be exploited and not made a fool of, but that he can be manipulated through that belief system. That's kind of what she's getting at. It's kind of cool.
And that ties in nicely with the scenes with Deep Throat, I think.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I know Deep Throat appears at the end. He misleads. Does he? I'm getting this confused.
He does,
the thing with Fallen Angel.
It's Scully that actually points out that the photograph that has been left for Mulder, that's meant to show evidence of the UFO, she says it's fake, and he's all for believing that it's real, but he goes and gets it analysed, and they determine that it isn't. And that's when he has the kind of quiet moment with Deep Throat at the aquarium. And Deep Throat also says a line that I quite enjoyed as well, which is, if a shark stops swimming, he'll die. Don't stop swimming. In other words, he's gonna feed him lies, and he will give him a bit of truth to keep him going. But Mulder just has to kind of accept that, and it just really kind of colours Deep Throat's character, and that deepens the mystery, but also shows how kind of how deep this conspiracy is. He says, "I don't have control or any kind of dealings with the is it the audio side or something," he says, "but I know that they're listening to you still." Right.
I do like the fact that it kind of leads to another level of understanding between Mulder and Deep Throat, in that Mulder starts to realise that sometimes he's going to be fed misinformation by Deep Throat, but the fact is, it's worth it for the truths you get. And it's kind of, in fact, he uses the line, "I'm wondering which lie to believe," when he's talking to Deep Throat. That kind of shows me Mulder appreciates he's been given lies, but he's also been given truth, and it's kind of up to him to try and figure out what's what, and why maybe Deep Throat will sometimes lie to him as well. Some really interesting, sophisticated stuff. As I say, it didn't quite work for me as a perfect episode, but I thought it was a good one. And the more I watched it twice, and the second time I liked it even more. I could really feel the quality of the writing that was adding so much to sort of each of the scenes. And I could be wrong, but I kind of remember it kind of almost becomes a running joke that whenever Scully starts talking about how paranoid people are, things happen to her that sort of negate her argument. You know, she finds a bug and stuff like that. I think that happens in later episodes, but we'll wait and see. We'll wait till we get there. I kind of got that in my head, but I'm not entirely sure that's correct. So we'll see. Anything else to say about this one before we score it?
I just say that I really liked the ending.
Where Deep Throat sort of reveals his what motivates him.
Yeah, and if you believe that as well. But
Indeed.
I really kind of like that, and the fact that Mulder risked his own life to finally get an answer.
Yeah.
That was a really nice ending to the show.
Yeah. On a slightly more comic note, in those last final scenes, is we also see how terrible Mulder's sort of infiltration skills are again. It kind of gets caught straight away, kind of thing. But you know, he doesn't care. He needs to know the truth at risk to life and limb, as you say, and that's kind of telling and interesting. I was kind of surprised that Mulder doesn't see, because Mulder's alone. I thought he would actually see something rather than an empty bunk, because you know, in Fallen Angel, he does witness something because Scully's not around. You know, whenever Mulder's alone and something's kicking off, he usually sees something, and then you know, Scully turns up too late. So I was expecting something to be there, but it's kind of an even nicer and more paranoid twist that there was nothing in the cot, that, you know, in the room that Deep Throat told him not to look at. You know, Jerry Hardin as Deep Throat just delivered on this one.
Yeah, he's kind of, like you say, his reasoning for, well, not kind of his reasoning, but when he explains how he feels guilty for taking the life of an extraterrestrial, and he's quite emotional, that bit, but it's a perfect ending for me because of the notes of paranoia throughout, that, like you say, you don't see anything, and it just keeps all of that conspiracy, you know, nothing's confirmed. It's just perfect, kind of, like, I understand why, you know, you may not be too happy with the episode overall, but I think, like I say, that all, you know, the bitty elements just add to that sense of paranoia, and nothing quite adding up. Yeah,
I mean, I think my issues with these episode was probably the first half of it, where I just felt it was skipping around a bit, but I can't actually say it didn't hang together, because it did hang together. It just felt a bit odd that there was a few sort of shortcuts that felt a bit silly, like I could have got it wrong, but it seemed like they were tracking the truck by UFO sightings. That was their technique for tracking the truck, and that seemed a bit silly, but it didn't diminish the enjoyment of the episode whatsoever. I did enjoy it a lot, and like I said, I watched it twice, enjoyed it much more the second time. I think it's a very solid episode. Anyway, what would you rate this one out of 10?
I would give it an 8.
Yeah, I'll give it an 8 too, so we're on the same page with that. Cool.
Son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along. When they gathered around and started talking, Cousin Billy would take me walking. Out through the backyard we go walking. Then he looked into my eyes. Lord knows to my surprise, the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. Yes, he was. Being good isn't always easy, no matter how hard I try. When he started sweet talking to me, he'd come and tell me everything.
The next episode was Miracle Man. This was first aired on the 18th of March 1994, so actually a whole month later. I do not understand how it may be that in America, yeah, these types of series did skip weeks, and it just seems a really odd sort of schedule. But anyway, it was a month later. Here, It was actually written by Howard Gordon, and he didn't want to work on his own, so he wrote this with Chris Carter. So it was a slightly different collaboration to what we're used to. Directed by Michael Lange, and now this is an interesting one. It deals with holy roller kind of preachers in the Midwest. I think I don't think they were Southern. I think it was Midwest, and it starts with a man apparently burnt to death. But a preacher and a young boy sort of pray over him, and the boy lays his hands on and brings the man back to life, which is kind of amazing. And then in modern day, we dovetail into a story about this preacher and the boy who's become a young man, who the preacher says he found, but it appears is actually his son, but he doesn't want to admit to that for whatever reason. Plus the man who was saved, who was burnt, but brought back from the dead apparently, and kind of about loss of faith. The boy whose name is Sam is healed, has died, which leads to his loss of faith. So there was some interesting themes. What was your feeling about this episode?
Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was a change of pace, especially from the last one, and it again allowed us to. It's more of a psychological episode, again, and it really kind of brought out Mulder's kind of focus on his sister, and nothing. I don't know. It isn't really. It's one of those ones that kind of straddles the line between supernatural and psychological, and that's always kind of interesting to me anyway when something does that.
I find that it tends to be more interesting when it sticks to that line. This firmly became supernatural at the end. To me, anyway, it could be interpreted in different ways, but it seemed to me it did jump into the whole, this is a supernatural thing. I think some of the themes on it was really, really interesting. I really liked there was a couple of themes. Now, I didn't say at the beginning, we are going to spoil these episodes, let's be clear. I think there were two kind of possible themes in the episode that it could have actually explored a little more, but it actually kind of tried to juggle quite a lot of elements, and it all felt a bit too packed in terms of all the ideas into the one episode. This idea of like an ungrateful kind of Lazarus figure, didn't want to be saved, because what he's been brought back to just as I thought it was an interesting idea. And also the fact that a genuine healer has lost his faith, that was kind of an interesting idea. And it was kind of a shame it was a mishmash. But having said that, I did enjoy it. I thought it was rather good. We also get the point where Mulder's talking to Sam, and Sam tells him about his, he sees his pain and he's lost a sibling, and then he focuses on a sister. And it was kind of, when I watched that, I was thinking, is that a cold read? Could that be a cold read? Because he doesn't say sister first, does he? He says a sibling, waits for Mulder to react, and then he says sister. Well, it says it in a way that it sounds like he knows his sister, but it could still be a cold read, trying to watch for a reaction. And straight from that point, Mulder starts seeing visions of a little girl who is wearing like a red dress, who we later see is a picture of his sister, that's disappeared. So they threw that in too, so there was lots going on in this episode. I mean, let's pick up that point. Do you think the sight Mulder seeing his sister added to the story at all?
Just to kind of cement that distinction between the supernatural and the psychological, because like you say, it could easily be a cold reading, and this is what people, who prey on others in this kind of line of work do. They can read people and body language. So I thought it was a nice kind of commentary on that, and that was done really well through Mulder, because obviously talk of his sister is on his mind. You don't know whether that's just in his head that's what he's seeing. I mean, even towards the end, when we see if we're spoiling it, when Samuel has been murdered, he comes back. And it's the man who was burned who sees a vision of him. But again, that could be in his head, and that's his guilt, because it was,
Yeah, I thought it was a little less ambiguous than it could have been. It could have been slightly more ambiguous. It felt like he really didn't believe he was a healer, And only once he saw him did he believe, understand he really was a true healer, which was a bit well, he kind of knew he was a healer because he'd been brought back from the dead. But had he,
Had he? Was that not just literally, he actually survived and it was...
Yeah. I mean, another interesting thing I found about it was quite reverential to this kind of look at holy roller preachers, working in tents set up in a small town. It wasn't taking in fact, Scully was quite respectful. Mulder, it almost felt like Mulder couldn't really handle it, so he was cracking jokes. It's like Mulder doesn't do conventional religion. Any wacky other stuff is fine, but conventional religion just he's gonna take the piss out of it, really.
It reminded me a lot of the earlier episodes of True Detective and that kind of same dynamic and approach between Rustin Cole and Marty Hart. That one is a kind of devout believer and very respectful, and you got Rustin Cole who's just completely taking the piss.
Do you think they were riffing on this?
I think I would say so now. I wouldn't have said so just watching True Detective straight out, but after watching this again, the parallels I thought were quite obvious. Yeah.
Yeah. One other thing was we find out Scully is invested in conventional Christianity. She mentions she was raised a Catholic. And she comes up with a line that's something like, "The God would never let the devil steal all the spotlight," or something like that. And Mulder actually says, "I bet you like The Exorcist," and she says it's my favourite movie. That's kind of fun. That did make me laugh. But Mulder kind of, until he, sort of odd things start happening, he kind of is quite dismissive of it and thinks, he's taking a bit of fun. Now, the story didn't quite hang together for me. How did you find it overall?
Overall, like I say, and I think picking up on your points, it has a lot of really interesting content, but it might be a little bit overloaded in parts.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, there was one thing I didn't quite follow. The sheriff's wife was in a wheelchair, and that seemed to be feeding a problem with this kind of faith healing within the sheriff. The sheriff kind of had a bit of a problem. Well, he had a big problem, in what he chose to do at the end. But I didn't quite understand that. There was something to do with his wife being in a wheelchair. I didn't quite understand it. Did you pick up on any sort of story points?
He just thought that he was a fraud, and then when people were dying, his belief, I took it to be his belief in religion was that somebody wouldn't be able to do that religion would be pure. And, this is kind of devilry, like black magic, that kind of thing. And he wouldn't let his wife be healed. But, I mean, it's a good job he didn't really, because of the plot of how people were actually dying. But he did, on top of everything else, conspire to kill an innocent person, not just break their faith, but to kill an innocent person.
Yeah, I mean, that to me was a problem. I don't understand why a sheriff would kill a young man because of... It didn't quite ring true to me. I don't think... This sheriff didn't seem that kind of character. I have to say, I think everyone was pretty good at actors in it. Sam and the sheriff were pretty good actors and worked for me, but it felt to me this sheriff was he was weary of it, but it didn't feel like he'd be the sort of man to order a young man to be beaten to death in effect.
It feels like right. No, it feels like there was a big chunk of the script missing.
Did you know? Well, you must have noticed when they were beating him to death. He was like taking the position, basically the pose of Christ on the cross.
Yeah.
While they were beating him, that was a fairly obvious sort of metaphor. I don't know, allegory or whatever. I also had a bit of problem with this ungrateful Lazarus character waited 10 years before he. Did what he did. That sounded that there was no reason he would just wait that long. Nothing basically a slightly better script would have had a precipitating factor.
Yes.
For bringing this on, but there wasn't one. So it didn't feel quite. It felt like, yeah, the motivations don't make sense to me. You know, I mean, sorry, as a motivation, it's fine, but the timing didn't work for that motivation. Having said all this, you know, I've sort of complained about it. I kind of liked it as an episode. I thought it was a slightly above average kind of episode. The girl in the red coat reminded me of Schindler's List a bit, the sort of effect in that. But that was made, I think, a year or maybe a few years before this, so that would have been seen. I would have liked to have developed one of those other strands a bit more, though. I think that would have been really, you know, a Lazarus that's got a problem with someone healing him, or, you know, a faith healer losing faith, and how does he regain that faith? Because basically Sam has to die in this one to sort of regain his magic powers, as it were.
Yeah.
And that's a bit too pat, really. For me, I don't think I've got much else to say about this one. Any last thoughts before we score?
No, not really. Like you say, just a lot going on that doesn't necessarily work together.
Yeah. Okay. What do you? Let me give you my score first, because I always ask you first. But I would give this 6 out of 10. I do think it's slightly above average and kind of interesting. It looked nice. It was well shot. But the plot felt a bit too dense for the running time. They should have paired a few things out and developed other things a little more. Maybe it would have been a better episode for that. So what would you give this?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything you've said there, and I think I'd be at a 6, just because of how intriguing the ideas are, but that it's just too much.
Okay, let's take a little break there, and we'll go into the next episode.
The beast in me is caged by frail and fragile bars, restless by day and by night, rants and rages at the stars. God help the beast in me. The beast in me has had to learn to live with pain, and how to shelter from the rain. And in the twinkling of an eye might have to be restrained. God help the beast in me.
Okay, so episode 19 is Shapes. Broadcast on the 1st of April, so 2 week jump. Which it seems to be 2 week jumps is the usual now. This one was written by Marilyn Osborne, who I think never wrote another episode. Directed by David Nutt, who's directed some of the great ones. You know, I think he directed Beyond the Sea and Ice, for example. And it starts off with a dark and stormy night. We see stuffed birds and animals in a sort of thunderstorm inside a house. And then 2 men, who are father and son, go out with guns because they think something's attacking their cattle. There's obviously been previous attacks on their cow, and they're a bit miffed about it. But then some animal attacks the boy. Sorry, he's a man, but the son. But the father shoots it, and then we find it's a young man who's been killed by the shot. And then Mulder and Scully get involved. This is a pretty straightforward werewolf story, in effect, isn't it? Mm-hmm. The initial setup did really remind me of the beginning of American Werewolf in London. That's kind of it. Rung bells with that way, and the stuffed animals also were a bit, psycho.
Yes.
Now the twist in this is not just a conventional werewolf story. It's set within like a Native American. I don't know if it's within their reservation. It's sort of around the reservation, within and around. These the two men involved are sort of farmers that are nearby who have got a sort of land right dispute with the Native American reservation.
Yeah.
Nearby. So the implication may be that this, I should have said, the young man who's been shot did come from, it is part of the reservation. So there's a question of whether this is some sort of revenge or, grudge killing. And they go talk to the man Jim Parker and his injured son Lara, who seems to be recovering. And then they go and talk to the Native Americans. What do you think of this one?
I really like this one. I am a sucker for anything to do with folklore, so I thought it was a nice change in these kind of the four that we're looking at now. How we have quite very different storylines, and you got Monster of the Week and kind of mythology storyline. So it was, especially watching it after the others, it was quite a nice kind of refreshing change.
Yeah, this is pretty much a Monster of the Week, though it does tie back to the history of the X-Files, which I will come to in a bit. It was interesting. Our first one, the first one we discussed here is a pure mythology, and the second one is pretty much Monster of the Week, but it's got a little mythology because we got like Samantha as a little girl being seen, but this one's a pure Monster of the Week. I like some of the dialogue was pretty solid. I did like there was an older Native American called Ish who got on quite well with Mulder. He kind of detected that Mulder was a little more sympathetic to their belief systems. And their way of life, and he kind of got on quite well with him. Even though his first words to Mulder is he refers to an incident called the Wounded Knee incident, which I think was a sort of clash between Native American protesters and the authorities, which was, I think, fatal on both sides. I could be wrong there, but it was a fairly serious incident in American history. So I think he actually also comes up with the line, he calls him FBI, and Mulder says something like, "How do you know?" And he says, "I can smell you a mile away." And Mulder comes up with a wisecrack about his deodorant being made for women but should be work for men. It's kind of a nice line. Broke the ice a bit. We also get an alumni of Twin Peaks in this. I think the actor's name Michael Horse, who plays Deputy Hawk in Twin Peaks, and he's sheriff. I can't say his name. He's the sheriff in this, and he's reasonably sympathetic to the FBI. He won't let them conduct an autopsy because the dead boy is due to be cremated ceremonially, but he does allow Scully to examine the body, and she finds some large incisors, doesn't she?
Yeah, the sheriff's an interesting character because he kind of treads the line between like tradition and modern kind of and legal influences from the outside world, which is quite interesting, and I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah, it was good. He wasn't entirely unsympathetic to the FBI. He just made the point, I've got to live here and work here once you guys are gone, so yeah. I'm not going to disrupt the trust of the people around here, but he seemed to, it was I liked that character indeed. We find out also there's some kind of nice procedural stuff in this, isn't there? Like when Scully and Mulder are looking around outside after the attack, each of them finds some odd evidence, which I kind of liked.
Yeah.
What is it? Mulder finds a weird footprint, which is half man, half kind of paw, wolf or something.
Yeah.
Scully finds like a skin.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's really a bit gross. It's kind of, we as the audience we're privy pretty early that it's some sort of werewolf story, I think.
And then if we're not, we get that wonderful description of clinical lycanthropy from.
Yeah, we get one of
from
those.
Scully.
But at least it's Scully this time. It's not someone explaining it to Scully. That's kind of an interesting addition, clinical lycanthropy. Also, it tries to take the tack of mixing up what is Western, Western, sort of European werewolf folklore. And actually, I'm not even sure it is folklore. I think it might be movie folklore. Silver bullets. Well, no, actually, did I mention silver bullets? I'm trying to think.
I don't think so.
It feels like a very Western kind of werewolf, and then they kind of mix it out with Native American stories of the Manitou. I thought they were going to pull out the Wendigo at one point as well.
I did as well, yeah.
But they stick to the Manitou. But to be honest, this didn't feel like a sort of Native American sort of lore. It did feel like Western kind of lore, and they were just trying to give it a rationale within this environment. But there you go. What they do say, I think it said that the transformations from born of a rage in the blood that comes on at night. They don't mention the moon; it comes on at night. And there's also they attempt a little misdirection by sort of talking about the possibility that it's something that's transferred through family lines. And I should have said the boy that dies has actually got a sister who's really cross about things. She's quite an angry sort. Now the dead man's name was it John Goodensnake?
Yes.
I think so, wasn't it? This made me laugh because a few times I sort of misheard it, and I thought his name was Good in Sack. Well, that's an awesome Native American name, but it was Good in Snake. Honestly, I thought it was that.
Choose their own name.
Good in Sack. Nice. It's a sort of Native American name, Joey Tribbiani, whatever, isn't it? It's kind of feels like that. But it did catch me, it's like, what? It was only when I checked IMDb, Good and Snake. Okay. To be honest, though, the fact is, because they're only confined to 40 minutes, it's a pretty straightforward A to B kind of story. Someone gets bitten, and then they, become the werewolf. And the only twist thing is Scully thinks it's a mountain lion that's attacking her. I think that there was a bit of budgetary constraints here, because we actually saw the face of the beast, which was kind of cool.
Yes.
But when the attack happens, it kind of goes into blurry cam, slow-mo stuff, which I think they just couldn't. They ever tried to do special effects and it looked terrible, so in edit they changed it, or they knew they weren't going to pull it off, so they just filmed it away anyway. Yeah, as I say, this was directed by David Natter, and it's some really nice shots and scenery. It looks very cinematic to me, this one.
It does. It's a great location, and like I said, I'm a sucker for folklore, and it really didn't go into Native American folklore, especially surrounding werewolves like I hoped it would. It just kind of uses the background, like you say, for the more kind of movie or Western, European, whatever notion of the werewolf. And even that is quite, they don't talk about all of the tropes, like you say, with, the moon and silver bullets, which is nice in a way, because it kind of creates its own little mythology. But it seemed to just be using the kind of background and the reservation to kind of create that conflict between the two worlds. And that could have been much more detailed and much more dramatic, I thought. But it was a shame, really.
It felt like it needed 10 more minutes. That's how it kind of felt. Interestingly, this episode has a parallel in the Kolchak series. There's an episode called Bad Medicine, where there's basically a Native American kind of wizard magician type. That's how it's described. It's called a Diableros, who can change form to different animals, such as a dog or a crow. It's kind of an interesting episode. It's kind of has to be seen to be believed, because Richard Kiel, the guy that plays Jaws in James Bond, is like, 7 foot tall? He's the Diableros in that. So we've got that sort of 7 foot tall Native American dressed up guy running around Chicago and turning into a wolf and stuff. But I think you're working through Kolchak, aren't you? So you'll get to that at some point.
Yes, I can't wait for that one.
And you'll think of this episode when you see it. It's kind of a cool episode. There's also a mention that this particular case is a precursor to the very first X-File, where similar events happened, which was apparently opened or initiated by J. Edgar Hoover himself in 1946. So there's a bit of X-File history. We get a reveal of what the very first X-File was and when it was opened. So that was cool. Okay, yeah, as I say, I think this is a pretty straightforward werewolf story. It's kind of fun. It reminded American Werewolf in London was definitely what I was thinking the first time, and it had kind of a lot of the werewolf movie tropes, fast healing, the werewolf turning back into a man when it's killed, and retaining the wounds it got as a animal onto its human form, all that kind of stuff. It was fun. Any last words on this one?
Just that I quite liked the ending, picking up on that point about the first X-File case, because Mulder talks about how these kind of killings have happened in patterns over a period of so many years, and right at the end, one of the men says to Mulder, I'll see you in so many years. And it kind of leaves that open that it's all going to happen again. Yeah.
This one feels like there should be a sequel almost because of that ending. Yeah, and Mulder actually says, "I hope not." There does seem to be this 8-year cycle. They like their cycles in the X-Files, don't they? X number of years later, this happens with Toombs and this.
Yes.
So it's kind of cool. And I'm trying to remember what if there was a sequel. I'm pretty sure there's more Native American stories down the line. I just can't remember the specifics of any. Okay, what would you give this one out of 10?
I would give this a 7. It's called Shapes, so I really expected it, like I say, to have more detail in regards to Native American legends, and it didn't. It was a little bit shallow, I'm afraid, for me.
Yeah. I was borderline on this. I was kind of toying between a 6 and a 7. In fact, I wrote down a 6.5. But on reflection, I'm going to stick with a 6, I think. But I know it's a bit mean, but I think it could have been a little better. Though I kind of enjoyed it well enough. It's definitely highly rewatchable. And like I said in the last podcast, whatever I score any of these episodes, you can add 2 when you want to rate it as like a more general TV episode. So, as general TV, I'd give this an 8 out of 10. But in this X-Files, I want to be a little stricter because I want the good ones to be, really obvious. So I'm gonna give it a 6. Okay, let's have another little break, and then we'll get to our last one of this recording.
Watching her strolling in the night, so white, wondering why it's only after dark. In her eyes, a distant firelight burns bright, wondering why it's only after dawn.
Okay, so this one is Darkness Falls. It was written by Chris Carter and directed by Joe Napolitano. It was broadcast first time on the 15th of April 1994, so 2 weeks again. There's a jump. So we have it opens up in a very nice tense sort of dramatic scene. Loggers in like a forest are obviously arguing about something, panicking and scared, and they decide as a group to run for protection. And I think, do we see the glowing bugs at this point? I can't remember. Yeah, they get kind of chased by glowing lights.
Yeah.
So nice pre-credit sequence, very reminiscent of Ice, in my opinion. In fact, the whole episode is kind of reminiscent of Ice. We have some similar tropes. We're in a sort of a location that's quite remote. Mulder and Scully are in the centre of the action, and there's not many people with them. Although it has some nice different elements too that I kind of liked. Post credits, it's Mulder starts telling them Scully about the disappearance of loggers, and then he shows her a photograph from a similar group in 1934. So again, we got this circularity kind of business. And it's kind of a nice. Again, I'm not sure if Mulder's either teasing Scully or flirting with her. He's saying he's talking to her about the loggers. Because these loggers were rugged, manly men in the full bloom of their manhood. He's showing her a picture, and Scully says, "What am I looking for?" And he says, "Anything strange, unexplainable, unlikely, boyfriend." It's kind of fun. And they end up going, and he said, "Oh, come on, it'd be a nice, trip to the woods." That's how he describes it. And they go up, and it's bloody miserable, isn't it? Wet and horrible and muddy and disgusting. And like they're trying to get there, their car. Oh, also there's mention of eco-terrorists. What do they call them? Eco-warriors?
Militant environmentalists?
Militant environmentalists, yeah. And, of course, on the way there, they get taken out. The tyres get taken out by a trap left by these environmental activists. So they're forced to hike. And they find an empty camp with some communication equipment that doesn't seem to be working. But then they find a weird little cocoon thing in a tree. And I do like the fact that Scully gets sent out there. Mulder is such a wussy sometimes. And then she finds, she sees fingers of a dead man sticking through it. So something is in them woods.
Yeah.
There's two other characters. There's a park ranger and a head of security who's quite aggressive, and they uncover one of these environmental activist. His name's Spinney, and the head of security sort of blames him for everything, doesn't it?
Yes.
But he tells them about these insects that appear in darkness, and they find this really old tree that shouldn't have been cut down. It's been marked to be preserved, and it's got a weird layer that looks almost like epoxy resin in its rings. Basically, they figure out these bugs have been released by the cutting down of this tree and being reactivated. I can't remember the rationale for the bugs, because they talk about volcanic activity, don't they? And were they spewed up from the middle of the earth from an earlier decade? And there's also suggestion, I think, that radiation. There might have been radiation involved. I can't quite remember the rationale, but basically they're weird bugs that's kind of glow in the dark, but they kill people.
Yeah, I think it's there's a volcanic eruption, and that a large amount of radiation because of that was released from inside the earth, and because of that affected the environment, and that these bugs have been preserved and I think lay dormant within the tree, and then when it's been cut down, they have been released and they have been mutated.
Yeah, and that also leads to the implication that if an earlier party was sort of disappeared in the same way, they're not in just one tree, they're probably in several. So another tree would have got cut down before and attacked by them. It seems a bit silly that these little bugs managed to lift a man up into a tree, but it would have made more sense if the cocoon had been on the floor, actually. But
yeah,
it's a license, isn't it? What do you think of the bug effects?
I thought they were passable, and it was quite creepy. I mean, in a later scene, Scully realizes that they're all over her and they're on everything. They just can't be seen at all times, and that was just like, oh, that they're everywhere.
It was creepy, wasn't it? It was sorry, not creepy. It made your skin creep.
It really did. But I was interested to think when I was watching it how it held up on your Blu-ray.
It looked really good.
Oh, good.
Some of the on some of the Blu-rays, the night scenes aren't very good. They do look quite grainy, but on other episodes they're fine. These ones held up. The bugs looked a little silly when they were just floating lights, but actually, you know what? Things like when they were being examined through a microscope look really good, really nice. And I did. It didn't take me out of the episode at all. There was nothing in it that took me out of the episode. So it was at least passable. But I think a little better than that, actually. It's funny you should mention it because it never occurred to me it was weak. So yeah, it must have just been good.
Yeah.
It was quite exciting in places. I thought it was very tense. I mean, we had a few plot holes. They knew that light kept them safe. To me, it was like they should have built a fire or something. And I didn't also understand. There was one point, one of the who is it? One of the guys kind of panicked. It might have been Spinny. I can't remember. One of the guys panics and he's in headlights, and it's like, wouldn't the headlights protect him? But they didn't seem to. It's things like that.
Yeah.
And also, Mulder letting a guy go off with half their fuel seemed ridiculous, knowing what he needed to do. But, I mean, the bit that made me really almost start a stomach turn was the bit where Scully panics and hits the light bulb that's their only light bulb, and it starts sort of roll a bit like the bird, a scene from The Bird. The light starts going backward. No, not The Birds. Is it Hitchcock used it a few times, a moving light bulb. I think he used it in Psycho.
He did. Yeah.
So it kind of reminded me of that, and that was really tense. And knowing that their fuel's slowly running out, it's quite a wrenching scene, actually.
This episode, more than others, had quite horrific elements in regards to the narrative kind of tropes of watching a horror film, I thought.
Yeah, I mean, like I say, it's similar to Ice, but the difference is that Ice, the themes were paranoia and distrust.
Yes.
This was, if we do anything wrong here, we're going to die.
Yeah, survivalist
and we
horror.
might die. Yeah, and we might die anyway. It was kind of really interesting. Yeah, exactly.
In our 90s neon jackets, which I appreciated.
I also like the fact Scully kind of talked herself down from the fear. She started thinking about things more rational. She's concentrated on like rational, scientific thought processes, which calmed her down. It wasn't so much Mulder talking her down, was it? She kind of talked herself down.
No, that's just great characterization, I think, that that is her. She has to be in control. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny that everything they do seems to have been hampered by the eco warriors doing stuff. So they're kind of trapped because of that. It was kind of a bit of a reactionary episode in that, like, the eco warrior, I keep wanting to say terrorists, but that's really not the term I mean. Activists, bad, and mind you, they set up the logging company as bad for cutting down the old tree as well. So everyone was to blame, kind of, in this one. I do like the fact Scully makes a joke about Bigfoot at one point. They're talking about everything being wrecked in the camp, and she goes, I can tell you one thing. And Mulder says, what? She said, it definitely wasn't Bigfoot. And that was kind of cool. And the ending, what about that ending? I did not expect that. I thought they were going to get away with, having lights on them right at the last second. But it went further than that, didn't it?
It was, yeah. It's quite a scary ending there, to see them both in such peril.
We're not sure. I mean, they're covered in cocoons in the car. They weren't carried up to the trees, thankfully. And it was only by luck, really, that they got discovered because I think it was Spinney said he made a call before he got back to them to tell them they were in trouble. So it was only because of that call, I assume, that they actually got rescued in time.
Yeah.
So they actually do get cocooned and rescued from that. And we just about see them moving as help arrives. So we know they're alive, but then we see Scully kind of laid out and Mulder just about moving inside some sort of hazmat environment. But luckily the doctor tells Mulder exactly what's going on outside. It's not particularly secret. He says, we've got eradication procedures. We're slash and burn and pesticides and all this, that and the other. And Mulder says, "What happens if it doesn't work?" And the doctor says, "That's not an option." And then it just ends. It's quite a. There's no fairly perfunctory ending. It worked though. It worked. It was a really good ending.
Yeah.
There was definitely a lot of body horror is the not word. Things that make you cringe because you can imagine what it'd be like to be covered in bugs, or a lone light bulb being your only lifeline, and someone panicking and actually hitting it. It's kind of a horrible feeling. Was there any other elements you liked or disliked about this one?
I mean, I just love the concept itself and the fact that despite the efforts of the the militant environmentalists, that it was nature itself that was kind of fighting back. And that very, the ending is very kind of reminiscent of kind of, early science fiction, I think. And it has quite a dark message at the end, Yeah,
it kind of plugs into 50s realist science fiction, doesn't it?
Yes.
Like Quatermass and John Wyndham kind of science fiction. It's got that kind of vibe.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Do you think it bears comparison with Ice? Do you think it's a good to compare the two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a biological horror.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, because it's not a body horror as such, but it's definitely kind of biological or environmental horror even.
It's, what do you call it, like invasive horror. I think biological horror is a good description. It's creepy crawlers. Creepy crawlies. Really, isn't it? It's like, ooh, yeah. It's like kind of thing. What would you give this one out of 10?
I would give this one an 8 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. I think we've agreed all the way down on these, haven't we?
You're doing
Not
well.
quite on shapes, but mostly. 8 out of 10 from me too. Yeah, I think it's a solid episode. It's nowhere near as good as Ice. I think Ice is a far superior one, but I think this is still a very good episode. And worth your time for sure. Okay, let's wind it up there. I guess next time we'll be finishing season 1, so we've really got through these quite fast. But I have to say the next episode is the sequel to Squeeze, so I'm kind of looking forward to revisiting Eugene Toombs again. So thanks for coming on, Becky. It's a real pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
And remember, they're watching.
I